She was a trailblazer, one of South Africa's brightest scientific minds, young, dynamic, and passionate about the role of Black women in STEM, as well as reshaping the climate change discourse. But in 2022, at just 32, Ndoni Mcunu died suddenly while on holiday with a friend, leaving behind not just grief, but a gaping silence from a system that should have protected her. How does someone so full of promise perish under mysterious circumstances with no answers? This is the story of Ndoni Mcunu. Let's get into it. Today's story may not fit the typical mold of a true crime story. However, it is a story that speaks of a death that should have never happened, a death that was entirely preventable. And yet, even in its aftermath, no one has been held accountable. And this is why I felt compelled to tell this story, to pay tribute to this giant, but also to shed light on what happened, as well as raise critical questions in a country where silence all too often takes the place of accountability. Ndoni Mcunu was born on the 30th of November in 1988 in Durban, KwaZulu-Natal. She was the middle child of three, with an older brother and a younger brother who were both deeply protective of her as the only girl. At the time of her death, Ndoni was engaged to marry Philani Mthembu, who shared at her memorial service that the two had rekindled their relationship in 2018, stating that this time around he had promised her that he would not take her love for granted and he wanted her to be his wife. From a young age, her mind was drawn to understanding systems, how the world works, how people interact with nature, and how science can shape society. She earned a Bachelor of Social Science in Geography and Environmental Management at UKZN in 2013, followed by a Master of Science in Applied Environmental Science in 2016, also from UKZN. By 2022, she was a PhD candidate at the Global Change Institute at Wits University. Her research focused on climate change and agriculture, specifically looking at how these two forces impact food security in Africa. But her influence extended far beyond academia. She was recognized as one of the brightest young minds in environmental science in Africa and the globe, and was often invited on international panels discussing important climate change and environmental issues. Her many accolades included being selected as one of the Mail and Guardian's top 200 young South Africans. This was in 2016. In 2017, she was selected as a Mandela Washington Fellow, a flagship program of the U.S. Department of State's Young African Leaders Initiative. Also in 2017, she was honored by the Dutch Embassy in South Africa as one of the top 50 most inspiring women in tech in South Africa. Weeks before her passing in 2022, Ndoni was selected as one of the Humanitarian Awards Global Most Distinguished Women Changemakers in Africa 2020 and 2021. This award was scheduled to be formally presented to her in Ghana later in 2022. However, Ndoni's biggest pride was Black Women in Science, a non-profit organization that she had founded in 2015, designed to bridge the gender and racial gap in science across the African continent. Black Women in Science didn't just provide mentorship, but it also delivered concrete skills in proposal writing, grant access, and leadership development for young Black women in science. Ndoni understood the power of representation, and she explained that she had created Black Women in Science so that young Black women wouldn't have to ask for a seat at the table. They could build their own under her leadership in Black Women in Science.
When I go into the internet and I search the top 10 leaders in business and entrepreneurship, these are the top 10 names that I see. When I do a search for the top 10 business leaders or science innovators or those that win the Nobel Prizes, these are the leaders that I see. As an African, and more especially as a woman, I ask myself, where are we? Most importantly, why is it that we do not make these lists?
On the 16th of April 2022, Ndoni was on a short holiday with her friend Phumelele Mnomia in the Cradle of Humankind in Krugersdorp, South Africa. Not much is known about Phumelele. However, a family member of hers did pay tribute to her on Instagram, stating that she was born in 1987, therefore 33 at the time of her passing. The two women were camping in a luxury tent at the Cradle Boutique Hotel and were found unresponsive on the afternoon of the 16th of April 2022. Early police suspicion of the cause of death was a gas leak. However, investigations would have to be performed before conclusions could be reached. I will get back to that police inquest in a bit. Ndoni's loved ones were, as you can imagine, heartbroken by her sudden and shocking passing. She wasn't ill. She was not in a car accident. She was at the prime of her life, full of promise, purpose, and joy. To lose her so unexpectedly under mysterious circumstances that would only be clarified through an investigation was devastating. And yet, even in their grief, her family and friends were determined to celebrate her life and let the world know that Ndoni was here and that she left behind her mark, her legacy. Her memorial service, which was held on the 22nd of April, lasted for over 5 hours. It was a powerful tribute with speakers from all walks of life. Her colleagues at Wits University, women from her nonprofit Black Women in Science organization, her close friends, people from her church, family members, all came together to honor the remarkable woman that Ndoni was. Her fiancé Pilane attended the service in the very suit that the couple had chosen for their wedding, now wearing it to say goodbye to the love of his life. One of Ndoni's childhood friends, media personality Nandi Madida, spoke of their deep bond, describing Ndoni as a radiant light in everyone's life. She also shared memories of Ndoni's contagious laugh, something that many of the other speakers also mentioned. Her two brothers also spoke and shared memories of growing up with her and how even as a young girl, she outshone them. And she was always an overachiever. But they also praised her mother for raising her to become the giant that she did. Her elder brother even posed an important question directed at her scientist colleagues, wanting to know what they intended to do about her death, or how they were going to seek answers for a death that should have been and could have been prevented. Many on social media also raised their concerns about her death, with conspiracy theories even imagining that As a young Black scientist, her power may have upset certain individuals, that perhaps the accident was not even an accident after all. An inquest into the deaths of Ndoni and Pumelele revealed deeply troubling details. The police investigation confirmed that a gas canister was found inside their tent, attached to a heater. What made the situation even more distressing was the fact that the heater provided to them had been designed to be used outdoors. However, it had been supplied for the guests to use inside a canvas tent, which was an enclosed space with limited ventilation. The inquest findings therefore suggested that the likely cause of death was carbon monoxide poisoning due to the inappropriate use of the gas heater in the canvas tent. This raised serious questions about safety protocols and responsibility. And I will get back to the issue of responsibility just now. However, I also want to discuss carbon monoxide poisoning a bit, as I believe it is important to also raise awareness about it since we are talking about it. You know, carbon monoxide poisoning cases in South Africa, while rare, I would like to believe that many of you watching know of cases of people that have died from carbon monoxide poisoning from particularly coal burning braziers, also known as Mbaula. Please share those stories that you know in the comments section so as to raise awareness about the dangers of carbon monoxide poisoning. A story that I know is of a family that I know that lives in Joburg, of a father who was working the night shift, and every day he came back from night shift, he would wait for his teenage daughter to finish getting ready, and he preferred to take her to school before then sleeping after his night shift. On one winter morning, he came back from his night shift. As usual, his daughter was still getting ready for school. It was such a cold morning that not only did he drive his car into the garage, he also shut the door of the garage. But the biggest mistake that he made, which cost him his life, was that he kept his car on and he stayed in the car, believing that if he went into the house, he could fall asleep and not be able to take his daughter to school. He fell asleep in the car, and by the time his daughter finished getting ready, it was too late because the door leading up to the house from the garage was also closed, and carbon monoxide engulfed the open space very quickly and killed him. Therefore, you know, carbon monoxide poisoning is a real thing. It's not some story that was made up that the two died from carbon monoxide poisoning. It is a real serious thing that occurs. From the little research that I've done, I found that how carbon monoxide kills without inflicting pain or awareness to the person that they are becoming ill or that they are dying is that once it's inhaled, carbon monoxide enters the bloodstream and binds to hemoglobin, the protein in red blood cells that carry oxygen. And once the carbon monoxide binds to hemoglobin, it has a much stronger affiliation to hemoglobin than oxygen. Therefore, it replaces oxygen in the body without the individual realizing that. And that is how it is so powerful. Now, back to the two women's story. What is so problematic about this case is that it was preventable. It was something that did not need to happen. These two young women did not deserve to die in this way. They booked into a hotel that they believed was reputable, that they trusted. Moreover, even after their deaths, no one has been held accountable, criminally or otherwise, that we know of. The hotel seems to have been cleared by authorities and started operating as normal after the investigation. There has never been a statement made publicly by the hotel in this matter, not even when the incident first occurred. No apology that we know of or anything like that. If there was an apology, perhaps it was made to the family privately. However, during the investigation, another thing that went wrong is that the family stated that they got their updates about the investigation from the media, that the police perhaps did not try hard enough to keep the family up to date. In all this, the question that remains for me is, where is accountability? In other countries, such as in the US, families of loved ones who die in similar circumstances often sue for wrongful death due to suspected negligence. The National Center for States Court in the US notes that these claims often result in payouts of hundreds of thousands to millions of dollars alongside public accountability and corporate reform, where these big companies are forced to change how they do things. But in South Africa, that kind of justice feels like a dream. Even in cases where safety standards are questioned or corners appear to have been cut, companies are rarely investigated deeply or held accountable. The public is often left with speculation, not answers. The families are left with grief and no justice. So, I wonder why it is so difficult, seemingly, in South Africa to have accountability, to have someone be held responsible for these wrongdoings. How does that hotel get away with it was an accident, so it happened? And how does the inquest seemingly just clear them like that for giving two young women in the prime of their lives a gas heater that is meant to be used outdoors and is given to them to be used in an enclosed space with limited ventilation? How do they get away with that? And it's just they go back to operating like nothing happened. These aren't just legal questions, they are also moral questions, because Ndoni's life mattered. The life of Spumelele also mattered. And that is it for today's story. What are your thoughts about this tragic loss of life and the lack of accountability thereafter? Share your thoughts in the comment section. Thank you so much, and I hope to catch you in the next one.